Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, and welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism. I hope you and yours are well. Great to have you back. Well, you all know it's been a heck of a week, lots to discuss, so let's not hang about, let's get them in. Of course, over there in Edinburgh we have Mr. Quinnan. Mr. Quinnan, how are you?
I'm a man who couldn't find a mute button.
Just in time?
Yeah.
I wish there was a few had found a mute button. We'd have different topics this week.
Yeah.
And of course, up there in Clickmannon, our favourite lawyer, our Eva. Hi Eva, how you doing? You're not in Clickmannon.
No, I'm not in Clickmannon again. This week I'm in Greenock, and I'm no doubt that we'll come on to some of the aspects of fame that Greenock has, some for the right reasons and some in recent years for the wrong reasons. But it's looking good today, sitting here on the banks of the river, looking out at cranes, ships, ferries, shipyards, and quite a lot of activity in the town centre. Half a dozen people out fishing, and last night watched a young laddie out fishing with his dad, and the boy caught a fish before his dad did, which was quite funny to see.
Good. Well, when you said what's Greenock famous for, and you said you were there, Greenock's women's prison, so I was saved me having to ask the question. I don't think you can see people fishing from the prison gates, so you're okay. You're not there, that's the main thing. Greenock, I used to live in the Dirty Wee Port. In fact, that's where I first stood as an SNP councillor candidate and get beaten, fortunately for the good people of Port Glasgow. And up there in the City of Discovery, it's Alan Petrie. Mr. Petrie, how are you?
Hey, Roddy, we're doing very well here. Been a very interesting week. Hopefully it's woken up a lot of pro-independent supporters.
The stress being on woke and up. And I don't know where he is, but he's here, the Cavalier himself. Coatbridge Cavalier, where art thou, Cavalier?
Yeah, just missed doing an Italian one because I'm just back from Italy, which is, I know, listen, I'm dead lucky, really grateful. Cracking part Cordenons, where it's kind of wasted on me in one sense because it's where they make Prosecco, and it's just between the Dolomites and the sea. It's like a lot of fizzy water, a lot of drunk women about, so it was a lot of laughter. But the Barolo up not so far away, Piedmont, stunning, absolutely stunning. So cracking. But here today, I'm in a damp Brussels, but not for long, heading off again shortly. So magic.
Me too, but more about that later. But it's a heck of a week. It is probably, I've got to say in my life, it's got to be the biggest defeat for Scotland ever. And it's all about the tactics, it's all about the leadership. And why Steve Clarke played 5 at the back, 4 in the middle, and 1 up front against a team ranked 40 places below us in the world rankings defies logic, and he should be sacked and replaced. Which kindly segues me into Lloyd. And before I start, Lloyd, about the Hamilton by-election, I've got to say one of the outcomes of that is someone was asking who we should get to replace John Swinney as leader. I volunteered you as leader of the SNP. Obviously, I did it thinking there might be something in it for me. But on a semi-serious note, if you were the leader tomorrow after what's happened in Hamilton this week, and I'm sure there's not anyone that doesn't know what happened in Hamilton this week, let's just a reminder, this the most iconic of independent seats, everything seems to have gone wrong for the SNP in it. What would you say about the results, and what would you do differently if you were the leader of that party?
The notion of being leader of the Scottish National Party at the moment, despite being a member of many years standing, actually kind of turned my stomach. The response from SNP members or people who claim to be SNP members in social media has been quite disturbing, actually, because it shows very clearly that there is a complete lack of true and truthful analysis of what has happened to the party over the past few years. But then again, a party who brought a failed leader out of retirement and set him up as the leader is a party that clearly has no hinterland and has no understanding of its own history. I found this week really depressing. If I were leader of the Scottish National Party, I would reinstitute the member-led policy development. I would move back to a situation where it's possible for the leadership to be changed by the membership, which is a circumstance that no longer exists within the party. I would return internal democracy, because the strength of the Scottish National Party was its membership. Yeah. The contribution that the membership made by hand and by brain led us to the situation where we were able to force the British to give us a Scottish Parliament. After a couple of terms of the Parliament, we then became the majority party, and we then had the joys and the successes of the first SNP minority government under Alex Salmond, which achieved in 4 years more than John nor Nicola Sturgeon have in 10. We were moving forward as a movement and a party. Unfortunately, the current leadership of the Scottish National Party believes that the party is more important than the country, and that's the central difference between the Sturgeon and Swinney leadership and the leadership under Alex Salmond. Salmond always put country first, party second. And until the SNP realises that it is merely the vanguard of a movement and re-engages with that movement and no longer sees itself as being brand Scotland, because it's not. I mean, I despair when I speak, and I've spoken over the past 24 hours to about 8 or 9 people I know from the Hamilton area. I despair that what I saw on social media was so-called SNP activists telling us that they were going round the doors, that they were talking to people. They weren't. Very, very few of them were actually canvassing. An awful lot of leaflets were shoved through doors. Leaflets don't create voters. That's a fact. The only thing that creates voters and brings them out, inspires them to get off their chair and go to the polling station, is eye-to-eye contact and conviction. The conviction of a good message, a message which stirs people. If there's anything to be learned from the Hamilton by-election, is we need to get politics back to politics and no longer about personalities and parties. The lesson for the SNP from this is they need to learn how to be the Scottish National Party again, not a job club, because all I see is people desperately trying to clamber aboard a sinking ship. People who, as I've said many, many times before, appear to think that politics is a wing of the entertainment industry. Mm. Well, what happened on Thursday was not entertaining either for the people of Hamilton, the people of Scotland, or real independent supporters who are members of the Scottish National Party, myself included. I think back to the by-election in 1999 in Hamilton South, when George Robertson stood down, George Robertson, the Labour MP who became the head of NATO. He was sitting with a 16,000 majority. We went into that by-election expecting absolutely nothing. Now, we didn't win. Okay, we didn't win. But I'll tell you this. If you can shift 16,000 votes and turn them into 652, then that is a political machine with a message that resonates. The fact that I had to watch on Thursday an SNP bereft of ideas, bereft of political engagement, with very, very, very little respect for the voters that they were asking to come out, and being punished as a result of it. But I think that there's an interesting lesson here, and it's not about reform. It's about where did those people return their vote. Labour won that because people who previously, and it was seen on the news broadcast, people who previously voted SNP, who would never consider voting for reform, went back to the Labour Party as the Labour Party being the safe pair of hands that people think it is. It's a tragedy. That is a tragedy. The Scottish National Party, under John Swinney's leadership, much as it was in 2001, 2 and 3, is not seen as either a safe pair of hands or indeed being on the side of the electorate of Scotland. He is seen as a party man with party interest, and that is all. This is not the National Party. And that's the biggest for me, the biggest tragedy of this week.
No. Going on from one of Lloyd's points there, Eva, about them not knocking on doors, not canvassing, something, of course, that we'll come on to later about Liberate Scotland, that is their main focus, is going to be canvassing. But the fact that they weren't canvassing, because all through this, towards the end of the campaign, John Swinney was standing there saying, yes, it's between us and reform. They had discounted the Labour Party. Now, if they had been canvassing and talking to the people as they said they were, you would pick this up in the doorways, you'd pick it up in your canvass returns, that Labour were actually coming up in the outside lane, which shows that, one, they were lying about knocking on the doors and engaging with the public, and two, they weren't canvassing at all, and it shows that the lack of the proper leadership or strategy within that party is why one of the reasons they actually lost the contest.
As our friend Councillor Gordon Murray said, it's the first time in political history where the horse placed third came first in a two-horse race, and that's what happened. But it's a sad indictment on the SNP that they have unfortunately become so very out of touch with the people that they purport to represent and with the movement that's happening within Scottish politics today. Because if you look at the statistics and compare last week's result with the result in 2021, what you see is the Labour share of the vote actually reduced. It went down by 2 points. But the SNP share went down by almost 17 points. There's your answer. There is not a Labour surge. The SNP vote has plummeted. And this is at a point in time when A, the Westminster government is at its weakest and most unpopular for decades, and B, support for Scottish independence is at its highest, probably that it's ever been. And if there was ever a time for the independence movement to cash in, to drive forwards, to get the results that the people need to see, to give them hope and the optimism that 26 can be life-changing and it can change our country, last week was the golden opportunity for that. And instead of picking that up and sharing that opportunity with the entire movement, creating a united movement behind one candidate, which would have had the support of every independentista in the land, instead of doing that, what John Swinney did was he dumbed down the campaign, just like Tony Blair used to do, and he reduced it to the absurd by never ever referring to the raison d'etre of the party, independence, by talking about what he described as bread and butter issues, such as the cost of living. And what he should have been doing, because the cost of living is important, is by spelling out that the cost of living crisis, issues surrounding fuel and housing and education and services generally, are all underscored and underpinned and influenced because we're not an independent country. And he should have said that the answer to all of these ills that face our country and the reason why we're not realising our potential as individuals or as a society is because we are thrilled to Westminster. That was his opportunity to create the big picture, the big vision. We could have had billboards all over the constituency talking about Scotland's future in Scotland's hands. We could have had what we had in 2014 when we had the posters with the wee old age pensioner granny, her hand and the bairn's hand in the other. We could have had the pictures of the young men standing looking for help, whether it was at food banks because they're the working poor, or queuing up outside mental health institutions, or looking for assistance from the Men's Sheds organisations because of the want and the need that there is in our country. And we could have said what the solution to those problems actually is. We could have been building an optimistic case, but instead what we had was backbiting and nitpicking and photo shoots, insulting, offensive photo shoots of the payroll, of the MPs, the MSPs, the failed MPs, the failed MSPs, the office boys and girls, the would-bes, the gravy trainers, the aspirational gravy trainers, those who have passed vetting and should never have been allowed in the front door of the party. They certainly wouldn't have been in my day or in our day. So this was a lost opportunity, and you have to ask yourself, why was it lost? Was it lost or was it chucked? Was it thrown away? The baby in the bathwater went out because John Swinney is not actually actively pursuing independence as a goal for our country. And if that's the case, the evidence is all there. That's the direction in which the evidence points. The evidence does not point towards anybody in the higher echelons of the SNP currently supporting independence as a short-term, let alone a long-term goal. What you've now got, as we know, the likes of Stephen Flynn, Stephen Gethins, who were only elected last year to Westminster, trying to get into Holyrood next year. Why are they trying to get in there? They're pretending it's to deliver independence. They are currently elected to deliver independence. They should be having a powwow with John Swinney on a daily basis, persuading him to lift the phone to the other independence supporting people in the country, to Civic Scotland, to Spin Doctors, to those like, for example, Jeff Aberdeen or Kirk Torrance, or those controversial folk who have in the past been involved in real independence campaigns. Instead of that, you saw a clown show in that Hamilton by-election where you had press releases saying, vote for our magnificent candidate, she's fantastic, she'll do a great job for the people here, standing up for Scotland. Well, what the hell does that mean, standing up for Scotland? Because if standing up for Scotland comprises what we're seeing now, I would hate to see a governing party that's on its knees. And Scotland will remain on its knees unless and until we're governed by people with a spine. Because, you know, to quote Winnie, who in turn quoted, I think, was it Oliver Brown? When that shiver ran into Westminster looking for a spine to run up. Well, that's what you had in Hamilton, and it's what you're going to continue to have in Holyrood if people continue to elect or support or be hoodwinked by those in the independence movement who wouldn't know one side of a self-determination envelope from the backside of a backhander from a unionist determined to keep Scotland down.
Yeah. And on Stephen Gethins, let me just say, our Alan here, up there in the City of Discovery, will be standing against him, folks. If you're an independent supporter and you're in the Dundee area, get out and help Alan and make sure another trother doesn't get a seat or get two jobs with two Jags. What was his name? The guy from the Labour Party, two Jags, whatever his name was. Not even two jobs in Gethin. Phil, I want you to look at this. You know, Hamilton is, for us nationalists, is probably the most iconic seat of all because of Winnie in 1967, who kicked it all off again, and we got going just as Bam from Bamshire is because of Alex seating up there for his. But the most iconic is Hamilton. And we lost it. We, the independence movement, should never, ever lose that seat. That should always be ours. But here's what John said about the show now. This is the leader of the Scottish National Party, the man who said all along it was between the SNP and Reform and they would win it. And this is what he said after the event and everything that happened.
And are you the right man to do that? Because you spent an awful lot of time in Hamilton in the last few weeks. Your face was front and centre of the campaign. Ultimately, voters have rejected you and your party. Are you the right man? Do you believe you're the right man to take the SNP into Holyrood 2026?
I recognised when I became First Minister and SNP leader last summer that there was a lot of work that had to be done to strengthen and rebuild the SNP. And we made some progress last night, not enough, and I'm being perfectly candid about that it wasn't enough progress. I want us to make more, and I'm committed to make sure that's the case.
Some of your MPs within your party already calling for not just more progress to be made, but a full reset. Joanna Cherry, for example, saying that this needs to be a wake-up call, that talking up the reform bogeyman is no substitute for good governance, and indeed that total reset is needed. That is quite damning, is it not?
And what the SNP government is focused on is the priorities of the people of Scotland. So I'm in government to eradicate child poverty, to boost the economy, to improve our public services and to make sure we can get to net zero and to make the progress in people's lives that they want to experience. Now, we're seeing some of that progress being made. Scotland's got lower child poverty rates than the rest of the UK. Our economy is strengthening. We're seeing progress being made on the National Health Service, but I want to make more by reducing waiting lists and improving access to GP services. So all of that work is underway to build the services and the the platform that's required for people in Scotland, and we'll do more of that in the run up to 2026.
Do you accept you will have to change your message, though, from vote SNP to stop reform? That clearly didn't work last night, did it? Do you accept that?
Obviously, we'll configure our message that's appropriate for the times and the circumstances that we face. But what we faced last night, and what's evidence from the result, is the Labour vote was collapsing in Hamilton, Larkhall and Stonehouse. It was down 20% on the general election last summer, and the reform vote was surging. Now, these are the dynamics that we face in Scottish politics, and I've got to make sure the SNP, who made progress last night, is able to make more progress in the period ahead.
And are you the right man to do that? Because you spend an awful lot of time in...
Absolutely. I mean, balderdash is the most polite word I can say before the hour, the 9 o'clock watershed hour, Phil. He talked, you'll notice one word they didn't, and the whole time he was getting interviewed, there was one word they didn't mention. But we've done, I knew there was work to be done. Progress towards net zero, better this, better that, strengthen progress this. He's lost the most iconic nationalist independence seat in the country. And we made progress. Explain to me, Phil, how losing that seat is making any kind of progress.
Beelan, where do you start with this? The legacy that Hamilton, we follow up here. And is this it? Is this joke? Is this it? I'm Beelan, absolutely Beelan. Child poverty is talking about reducing, and that's their objective, that they reflect the will of the Scottish people. No, you don't. You're not even close. The Joseph Rowntree Foundation, which we quoted recently, I think we did it a couple of weeks ago, show that we're still 1 in 4 children in poverty. Slightly better than a place that's slightly worse. Not good enough, John. Get the hell out of there. Net zero, utter garbage. It's a nonsense. Net zero does not make any sense. It's unachievable, and it's a con in which we're being sold high electricity prices. The only thing net zero is doing is producing record profits for the companies that are making energy and record costs for the punter. Check out a speech I did, a presentation at SSRG on their conference on energy with Reece. The guy's brilliant, and we know what's going on. Healthcare, he's talking about protecting the NHS. You won't be there, you clown. You're an idiot, John. Reform will destroy Holyrood. They're on the rise everywhere, and you're sitting spouting garbage like that, glib sound bites. It's the crap that enrages. It should enrage us all, because he's putting us all in jeopardy here by not standing up for Scots. And get the hell away from this warmongering, crazy nest of vipers that is London. Get the hell away from these people who will kill us. We're a target now, and I know we'll come on to that later. But on the actual SNP loss in Hamilton, we told you. Nobody likes saying that, but it's what SNP deserved, and we will continue to dish up more of this critique of the SNP and showing people for what they are until they remove the shyster cabal of Nicholas, which still run SNP and which was the architect behind the stitch-up of Alex Salmond. Is now fighting for its survival, because many should go to prison for their part in the stitch-up of Alex Salmond. And I, for one, am happy to part fund that action, because oust these quislings, then march to freedom. That's the point. On the election itself, I mean, there was a first paragraph of The Independent that Labour pulled off a shock result. Okay, and it shows their ability to fend off the rise of reform in the UK and wrest Holyrood from SNP's control. But Annis won Hamilton for Keir Starmer and this clown that they put up front. But it is reconfiguring the political outlook. But what I really want to point out is, please read Wing's report, The Jokers. As ever, the Reverend nails it. Absolutely. Looks at the odds, the forecast. SNP were 34%, Labour at 28%, Conservative at 7%, with Reform at 23%. That were the odds, right? And we saw what happened. But the big stuff, the scary stuff for me, and this is where the unification that we talk about and that is being denied, that's cheating the people. You're stealing from the people of Scotland, John Swinney, Angus Robertson, and all you shysters at SNP, Nicola Sturgeon, you as well. We're not forgetting about you because we know who you are. We know where you are. But we look at Reform and Tory. You join their numbers together, 8,709. The right wing get 8,709. SNP, when you add the Green, 8,652. Labour, 8,559. While we're separated, while we're fractured SNP and Alapa, you pay attention to. While we're separated, we're vulnerable and they can fight as they jockey for position. But right now it's a three-horse race, almost identical. If the Greens were real about independence and stop talking pish, that's the only way they get on board. But Reform and Tory are currently the right wing in Hamilton, and that legacy independentista centre of excellence, it just shows you how bad SNP are, that they have betrayed us to the point that the people have didn't show. Even if we put all the indie votes, supposed indie votes together, we don't beat Reform and Tory, and we just ahead of Labour. And remember, better together. When it comes, they will unite. It doesn't matter if it's Reform, Tory, Labour. You put them together, it's almost twice as much. SNP and Green, the independence vote drops to a third. That's the message here. And that's what has to go over to the punter. Because wake up, folk, because we will not have a Holyrood with which to use if we allow these shysters like John Swinney. John, get out the country. Angus Robertson's, get out the country. You're a disgrace. It's coming. And we've got to act because it's gone too far. We've got to get angry. We've got to get even. We've got to unite or we're done. We're done.
Thanks for that, Phil. Alan, in that video we played of John Swinney, even after he's been found that he's still talking up reform, and it's something I'll come back to. I mean, it was Lloyd mentioned it last week. The first thing he did was, as soon as reform said they were standing, he started talking up reform. He did that. He talked about the Labour vote was collapsing. Well, if it collapsed, how did they win? The fact of the matter is, Christine McKelvey, they voted half the SNP votes stayed at home. It wasn't just a 70% drop in the night, but 50% of those who voted for Christine McKelvey back in 2021 didn't bother going to the polling station. You highlighted it last week, Alan. There's more people now who support independence who don't support the SNP. There's a bigger people, and they're staying at home, and that's the problem.
Yeah, I mean, the SNP are just losing vote after vote after vote, and it's quite worrying. Now, the first rule of any campaign is you set the narrative. You do not talk about your opposition, because when you talk about your opposition, you give them publicity. And it looks now that the core unionist vote, which isn't a high vote, the core unionist vote are now going to reform. That is clear. They are now siphoning off other votes that are soft union. And the reason that they're doing that is because the SNP said that they were a threat to the SNP. So those who didn't like the SNP were going to reform. But the interesting thing is, and I don't deal with percentages. I like to deal with real figures. I think it tells a better story. In 2021, the SNP had 16,761 votes. On Thursday, they got 7,957. That is a loss of 8,804 votes. Not only is that more votes than what the SNP got, it's more votes than the winning Labour candidate got. Mm-hmm. So the independence vote that is there for the taking of true independence candidates are winning. We've just got to get them out to vote. And that's what we've been saying for a long time. Staying at home isn't going to get us independence. There's the evidence that you need. There is more pro-independence candidates, voters staying at home than there is coming out to vote for the winning candidate. We could have took the Hamilton seat if we had a real decent independent candidate. Now, the SNP, and I say this honestly, if you want to start building bridges within the Yes movement, you must do two things. One, put your hand up and say you're pushing for the trans queer agenda and the hate crime bill was wrong, and you will change track now and put independence at the top of the table. And you must also apologise to each and every pro-independence campaigner who have been out in the streets working their backsides off for the last 11 years while you have been making their job harder. That's the fact. And also say to John Swinney, stop pretending that independence isn't high on the agenda. Yes, we know the economy is high. We know poverty is high. And I don't want to be slightly better off than England on child poverty. I want child poverty abolished in Scotland. We have the money to do that. We are one of the richest countries in the world. We can do that within a day. That is not a problem. We have pensioners freezing in this country. Not one of these things can be fixed without having your hands on the levers of power, and that's the macroeconomic powers. Every single power in your hand. Without that power, you can do nothing except bow to your masters and just do their bidding for them. So let's get real here. We have lots of priorities. None of them can be done until number one priority, independence, is achieved.
Yeah. I've got to say that the problem is, I mean, even over, especially in Facebook, I just want to say, Stu Campbell, you've been replaced, and I'll explain why. I had one woman on Facebook who was telling, in fact, it was an article of yours that I printed in my blog site, Alan, your analysis of the Hamilton by-election. And this woman told me, after reading your blog, that I was the reason that the independence movement was fractured and the SNP was fractured. It was my fault because I had become very negative. Now, I didn't know I had that power. And so I'm saying to all the other parties today, all of the parties in Britain, if you don't send me some money to bribe me, I will bring about the collapse of your parties as well, because apparently I have got powers that I didn't know I had, with a couple of thousand people that read my blog in a good day. I mean, amazing. I didn't have those powers. But Lloyd, I go back to what you said last week when you were talking about the big mistake here, and this was before the polling stations opened, is that John had made was having his big anti-reform summit. He won't sit with the independence movement, but he was sitting with the Brits to defeat reform and topping-up reform. And you said that's the worst thing you can do. And you were proved right, because he did that, people didn't do what they should have been doing and ended up letting Labour in.
Well, the video you just played, he did it again. Not about reform, but what he said was, we're working on reducing child poverty. The fact of the matter is, John, and you know it, on the day and hour that we were both elected to the Parliament in 1999, 1 in 4 children in Scotland were in poverty. It is now 2025. 1 in 4 children in Scotland are in poverty. Why is that? It's very simple. It is impossible, utterly and completely impossible, under the devolution settlement to address the issues required to be addressed to deal with child poverty, because you don't control the economy. If you don't control the economy, if we are not independent, then nothing, but nothing that you want to do can be done properly. All you can do is mitigate. And there comes a point where people have to understand this. John also said, we're trying to reduce waiting lists. Why is he telling people, or rather, why is he effectively handing the opposition sticks to beat himself with? It's absurd. It's so easy to say it. Without control of the economy, we cannot improve our National Health Service. Without independence and control of our economy, we cannot address properly pensioner poverty, homelessness, the housing crisis, the drugs crisis. It's the unionists and the political bubble commentators love to say that independence is not a priority, the economy is the priority. Independence is about the economy. That is exactly it. That is the center of it. Only with independence do we get control of the economy. We are a rich country, the 7th richest country in Europe to begin with, possibly the 8th richest in the world. if you count all our natural resources and the power and the intellect of our people. Now, if you know this to be true, which we do, how can you possibly simply accept getting pocket money back from Westminster to mitigate around the edges? And somehow the people are supposed to be grateful. But at the same time, the ineptitude of this campaign has been quite extraordinary. A friend of mine who's a journalist called just before the polls closed on Thursday, called the communications team of the SNP and asked them what they thought the turnout was and what they thought was going on. The SNP believed that turnout, overall turnout, was 35%. He then phoned the Labour Party and asked the Labour Party what they thought. The Labour Party said, no, turnout's 45%. That tells you everything you need to know about the amateur nature of the Scottish National Party campaign in Hamilton last Thursday. If you don't know what the turnout is, it means you haven't got people on the polling stations, or if you have got them there, they don't know what they're there to do. Mm-hmm. Reporting hourly of what the turnout is in any polling station at any election is utterly essential, because that's how you direct the get out the vote campaign. If you know that a polling station is which maybe services 2,500, 3,000 people, and only 3% of them have voted, and it's 7 o'clock in the evening, then you need to move your people from a different part of the constituency to that part and get them out to get people to get out and vote. The simple fact of the matter is the well-oiled machine that reduced 16,000 votes in 1999 to 652 no longer exists within the Scottish National Party. And it's been a steady decline. And the primary reason for that is the necessity that the leadership since Nicola Sturgeon took over, their necessity to have total and complete control of everything. And the absurdity is that they cannot see that by exercising that overall massive control, they're actually sealing their own doom.
Yep.
And for me, it's shocking to see an organisation which went from being a very amateur organisation, developing its in some way setting the benchmark for campaigning in Scotland between the 70s and now. It was the SNP and SNP innovation that created the possibility for the SNP to become the government it has become and become the premier party in Scotland. But over the past 10 years, when you remove all the responsibility that's laid on members, when you take away their right to really take part in the democratic process, then what you do is you're effectively killing off the intelligence in your own party. If you operate on the basis of it's my way or the highway, which is Nicola Sturgeon's way of doing things, and very much John Swinney's. Just a reminder for viewers, I was a member of the Scottish National Party parliamentary group 1999 to 2003. I witnessed firsthand the ineptitude of John Swinney as the leader of the Scottish National Party. I had to operate under his management style for a number of years. And the fact of the matter is, during John's first tenure, the party lost seats, lost elections, and was going down in the polls. It was only with the return of Alex Salmond that the party began to rise again. And in the short term, it was a meteoric rise, because within 3 years of Alec returning, we were a minority government, and 3 years after that, we were a majority government. He built a bridge. He built roads. What has been achieved in the past 12 years under the Sturgeon and Swinney? Absolutely nothing, except the collapse of the SNP as a powerful political machine.
Yeah. What happened there, Eva? Lloyd just gave a perfect example. While the old guard, like us here, were chased out the party, and all these kids brought in straight from school and university to take over, all that experience was kicked out the door, and it eventually came back to bite them in the bum in Hamilton, because they don't. And people say politics is for it's show business for ugly people. I've always said that politics is sales and marketing for people that don't have a clue about sales and marketing. And they threw out all the sales and marketeers and put all the children in who think it's about virtue signalling. And that's exactly what bit them in the bum on Thursday night.
Absolutely. If you look at the makeup of the Scottish Parliament in 1999 and you look at the competence of Alex Salmond's first cabinet, it's not unlike the skills of, sad to say it, Margaret Thatcher's first cabinet, because those politicians in all of those places were mainly people that had already succeeded in other walks of life and had particular skills, experience and expertise, or if they were on the young side of the demographic, they had big ideas that they could back up with evidence and information and suggestions that had come from elsewhere. So where we've got to now is that Sturgeon, Humza Yousaf, John Swinney and those around them, who probably include Ian Blackford, Mike Russell, people like that, have utterly and completely dismantled the structure and the scaffolding and the preparation that was in place for us to become an independent country. And they've removed people's motivation from voting SNP because obviously, as at 2014, when we had a united campaign for yes, most of the people that were in yes had always been SNP voters or had recently been SNP voters. A few supported SSP, a few supported the Greens, and many were of no party. But basically, the SNP was understood to be the vehicle that we would all jump aboard and it would take us to independence. That has not been the case for a very long time. It is abundantly clear it will never be the case again, and certainly not within the next couple of decades. So we know support for the SNP is of the order of the low 30s, and at least another 20, 25, 30% of people in the country who don't vote SNP, who will never vote SNP again, support independence. Mm-hmm. So that is why comments such as this are really important. This was the Facebook page of Yes, Bothwell and Uddingston. Now, they're not connected to PRISM. There is nobody in Yes, Bothwell and Uddingston who has been influenced by the views of anybody here. They are an independent organisation supporting independence for our country. And what they said after the Hamilton result was this: the result in our neighbouring constituency must result in the SNP taking stock of where they went wrong and realising they must put a de facto independence referendum as the only policy in next year's Holyrood election, working with all the other indie parties and individuals in a united front. The fact that independence is polling at roughly 54%, but the SNP got less than 30%, must be the boot up the backside that is needed. It's time to unite. Let's make it happen. That statement from Yes, Bothwell and Uddingston is being repeated nationwide. In every part of Scotland, independent supporters are saying, John Swinney, get the finger out, lift the phone, speak to other independentistas, and look around you and see what's happening within the movement. You know, we do this every week. Sometimes you do it a couple of times a week, Roddy. Lloyd, Phil and Alan and I are all involved in other independent supporting initiatives and programmes and discussing with people constantly, whether that's in the public eye or it's behind the scenes. You spend hours and hours and hours in your week promoting independence and trying to bring people together. One such event is going to be next Saturday, the 14th of June in Perth, and it's the Scottish National Convention, Summer Convention on Scotland's Future. There will be discussions in respect of land, energy, democracy, and particularly from a personal perspective, what I'm interested in is a session on poverty and the wellbeing economy. I'm talking in that I don't want to be at events like this talking about poverty in Scotland. I don't want to be talking about how we need independence to eradicate poverty. We should not be having these conversations in Scotland in 2025. I was 6 years old when we discovered oil. I'm 62. And we're still in a set of circumstances where Lloyd says, with as many bairns in Scotland in poverty now than we did in 1999. That's the case. And that's why I'm standing against Keith Brown, because he was elected to deliver independence and signally failed so to do. There are more children in Clackmannanshire now in poverty than there were when he was first elected 20 odd years ago. So for Rosemary Champion and these other folk that slag me off for challenging the SNP, I'll promise you until the day I die that genuine independentistas like me will challenge the SNP unless and until they deliver independence following a united campaign. In the absence of a united campaign, the SNP must be challenged at every turn. They've been offered the carrot, which is unity in Liberate Scotland. If they don't accept the carrot, they'll find out what it feels to be on the receiving end of the stick, because this is not about personalities, it's not about egos. It's about delivering independence for our country so that we can transform Scotland into the place that we know it should be.
Yeah. Fabulous. 62, you don't look a day above 35, Eva. Not a day above 35. Look, we'll go back to it, Phil. When John was going through his little, bit there, I've been doing this and as I say, he never once mentioned the independence word. We've noticed it with him before. He rarely, if ever, mentions the independence word. I mean, Farage, does he ever not mention immigration when he's talking? Does Stammer ever once not mention Ukraine or Israel? But John, the leader of the independence parties, allegedly, doesn't mention independence.
And that's why his support is so low. And he's also telling the truth. At least it's the one thing he's been truthful about. He's not mentioning independence because he's not doing anything about it. It's not his raison d'etre. It ceased to be when Nicola took over. The cabal that currently run SNP have sold us down the river. The SNP leadership, in my opinion, at the moment, I cannot be part of the independence movement going forward and cannot be part of the governance of Scotland moving forward. These are knobsticles. They're worse than obstacles. They're knobhead obstacles. They're knobsticles. Anyway, you know how we feel about this. We should be enraged because knobsticles like Swinney, just jettison them. You've got to get rid. You've got to get rid of people like that, because once you're compromised, once you're like Nicola being blackmailed probably by the 77th and the powers that be in the MI5, then and who are very good at their job, very good. And how easy a target are these bozos, these clowns, these tree-hugging, lentil-munching, sandal-wearing gimps? It's appalling. It's appalling how easily they can be manipulated and how cowardly they are. That she would stab the back of her mentor, that she would orchestrate the deconstruction or the attempted deconstruction of the political career of our greatest politician. And as we've said before, he suffered the slings and arrows and all that the powers that be could throw against him, Alex, but he didn't see from what within the danger that came from within, but giving Nicola the golden keys of a free Scotland, which she instantly sold. She got the claws into her, and now she's protecting those who did the stitch up, and that's what we've got. This is why this guy who had the redacting pen during all of this game and was part of the stitch up and the setup, he's protecting his own skin. John, not good enough. If you want to just run away, do a runner. Don't know, take a canoe to Peru or something like that. I don't know. Just get out of here. Just don't waste our time anymore, because people are suffering, and that's the serious thing. Scottish people are suffering. It's getting worse for those on the ground because of cowards like you. Grow a set and do something decent with your life.
What did the people of Peru ever do to upset you that you want to send Swinney at them? Come on.
I mean, as a human being, you've always got to have compassion for your fellow human being. But when people do this and they're so spineless and the damage they're causing, then they refuse to take responsibility. Adults in the room, that's what we need. We need people with fire and principles, and that's currently not the SNP leadership.
No, but that's what's getting me as someone who started this journey in 1970. I mean, I joined the party in 1968 when I was still at school, but I started this journey in 1970, is to see, if you'd said to me in 1970, Roddy, 50 to 54% of the people want independence, I would have thought by 1975 at the latest we would be independent. To be given that, I know I could do, if we joked here at the beginning, half joked about Lloyd being the leader of the SNP. If I was, and I knew that we had over 50% support in the country, I would. I'm not just saying it. I'd be on the phone to Liberate Scotland, to Alapa, to All Under One Banner, to Salvo Liberation, to everyone who's got a sort of skin in the game and said, get together, guys. We can do this and we can do it immediately. I just don't get it. It annoys me. It frustrates me. It angers me. And for the people who say to me, oh, you're against independence. Oh, in raffle, you've done it, you dafty. But here's the thing, Alan, even showing how, as we say, we talked about when their party, when the SNP was member-led, the party, listened to the members. This was from this week. This is in Saturday's National. Our fears were ignored by the party, said people on the ground in Hamilton were telling headquarters, the reform's not the problem. Labour's the problem. Don't do it. They didn't listen, as they don't listen to their own members. They don't listen to the voters. They don't listen to the 500,000, the 750,000 people who are staying at home, Alan. If they don't listen, it's time for the people to talk to someone else.
Well, to begin with, if you asked me that question in 1970, I would have said, goo goo gaga, because that was the year I was born. Not trying to make you feel old or anything, Roddy, but that's life.
Well, I'm old. I'm an old man. I want it in my lifetime, folks. Get your asses in gear. Come on.
But it's true. I mean, hopefully this will make the SNP membership waken up, because we have been saying for years and years, the SNP leadership are no longer listening to you. Not only are they not listening to you, they do not want you to have your opinion, because your opinions and your views are too much in line with the Yes movement. And that puts the SNP in danger of doing what they're supposed to do, campaign to make every single one of their MSPs and MPs unemployed. Because their main game is to get an independent Scottish Parliament, then to have an election at that Parliament, which at that stage, I will doubt the SNP will be a party. Because the SNP was always a broad church when I was in it. And on independence, we would have all went with separate ways. That's just facts. But John seems to have this belief that he's going to scare the goats if he mentions independence. But it's the opposite that's happening. He's pissing off the genuine independent supporters and he's losing the votes. John, independence is the vote winner. Mm-hmm. It's not the vote loser, it is the vote winner. And that is why you are losing your votes. You're losing your votes quicker than a teenage boy loses his socks in his bedroom. So come on, get your act together. Put independence top of the agenda and start working with this movement. Because if you don't, this movement will bring you down. Now, that Absolutely. Woman who had a go with you, Roddy, on your blog, I think I met her during the week, and she had a go at me, saying, you've got no chance of winning your seat. Well, I've got news for you. I'm standing in the city of Dundee, one of the most radical tunes in Scotland. It was the women of Dundee who beat Churchill out of the city. Not only did they vote Churchill out, they voted for a man who opposed drinking, Neddy Scrimmager. In the city of Dundee, voted so they would ban drinking rather than have Churchill stay in power. That's the radicalness. And I'll tell you, not only can I win Dundee, I will win Dundee. I will be putting independence front and centre in this campaign, and the city of Dundee, the Yes City, will roar once more.
Yeah. And Liberate Scotland will be knocking on doors throughout Scotland with our campaigner app, believe that. But here's the thing, Lloyd, this is a kind of rhetorical, but I want you to answer it. Because how did it happen? This is the results from 2015, when Phil was elected as one of the 56 out of 59, almost 1.5 million pro-independence votes, 56 out of 59 seats. And now we know from last year's general election, only 723 or 733,000 people voted for the SNP. They lost more than half their vote. I know why, but I want you to tell the viewers why.
I find it very, very difficult to relive that particular night. I was at the Count here in Edinburgh, But before I get into that, I think there was something that Phil said in I think in one of the first prisms that I did with you all, was that when they got to Westminster, and there were so many of them, they assumed that those that had been there for a while, Pete Wisher, Angus Robertson, and so on, that they had a plan, that there was some plan of how they were going to progress things, and then it became clear that there was no plan. And I think that primarily has been the central issue for since Alec was defenestrated by Nicola Sturgeon and her cabal. You bring people into the party, you get them elected, and they think that is the be all and end all of it. That's the job done simply by getting elected. The next step, they leave that to the leaders. I've heard members of in fact, Ash Reagan said it, that she also believed when she went into the Scottish Parliament that Nicola had some secret plan, and that one day it would be revealed to them all and we would all march forward to independence. And the reality is, I will now tell you why that particular night is the hardest night of my political life. When I joined the Scottish National Party, it said on my card, on my membership card, on everybody's membership card, that we will deliver independence when we have the majority of the votes and the majority of the seats. Right? That's what it said. That was the means by which we would achieve it. That was in 1974. Yeah. By 2015, that was no longer on a membership card, and in fact was no longer the process by which we would achieve independence. So I watched as the most amazing night of my life in politics, to see the SNP take all but 3 seats in the country. It should have been the most joyous night of my life, because the next step would be independence, but it wasn't. I went home heartbroken because I knew that despite the fact that we had met the necessary qualifications for us to move the next step, which was independence, that nothing would be done. Nothing would be done, because that commitment of maximum number of seats, maximum number of votes was no longer the deal. So I knew that despite the fact that the people of the country who were deeply disappointed, the vast majority of people who actually came out and voted in 2015 had been deeply disappointed by what had happened the previous September when we lost narrowly the independence referendum. This was a restatement by the people of this country that they wanted independence. Yeah. Never, ever in history had so many people turned out and voted for the Scottish National Party for one reason and one reason only. They'd voted for independence the previous September, and they were voting for the SNP for independence in May 2016. It was a tragedy to know that nothing was going to be done. And here we are, 10 years later, just under 10 years later. And where are we? We're in exactly the same situation as we were in the morning of the count in May 2016. Nothing is being done. The perpetuation of the party, the perpetuation of the careers. But let me just throw something else in here. Now, we all know, and an awful lot of people out there in the real world know, that the removal of Alex Salmond and the means by which it was done has not completely come out into the open. Primarily because there's a bunch of people who it is in their interests not to allow it to come out into the public. So they have closed down all discussion therein. The Scottish National Party must be the only political party in the world who had a very, very successful leader, and they've taken his history and removed it entirely from the party's history. Astonishing, utterly and completely astonishing. But my real worry now is that headline from The National. When The National, which is the in-house newspaper of the Scottish National Party leadership, not membership, but leadership, is putting a headline that says activists warned. This reminds me of some of the headlines that were in the Daily Record, the Daily Mail, and in the Scotsman in 2003, just before John got removed from the leadership. I would suggest that that front page of the National is a sign that there are those that are on manoeuvres. There are those that are seeking to oust John. And if I thought any of them were any good, I would wish them well, but I don't. Because what I think, and shoot me down in flames for this, but are we going to see a repeat of what happened 2003, 2004, when Alec had to be persuaded to come back to lead the party and take over from John? Are we now seeing a scenario where maybe somebody thinks that the return of Nicola Sturgeon may be the answer? Because when you have a cabal of people who have a secret, that they know that if the secret comes out, their careers, their reputations are over, done with, finished. Those people remain desperate to keep that secret. And the only way I can see that you can maintain that secret would be indeed for Nicola Sturgeon to come back as interim leader. And then she can calm the party down. And by calming the party down, I would suggest she would arrange for a different succession. And I certainly know that there are members of the Scottish National Party group in the Scottish Parliament and at Westminster who are manoeuvring around at the moment with the intention of, at some point, becoming the future leader. But are they the people who are part of that inner circle that know the dirty secrets? No, they're not. The only one who knows the dirty secrets and can cover up for it into the future is Nicola Sturgeon. And I really do fear that in an attempt to restore some kind of equilibrium, the SNP membership of the moment would consider the return of Nicola Sturgeon as a gift. It's a foolish concept. I may be completely wrong, but I've seldom seen newspaper headlines which quote unnamed activists, except when the unnamed activist has been worked from the back by somebody who's on manoeuvres.
Dear God, no, please don't let that one come back. The despot. I'm kind of thrown now with that one, Eva. But one of the telling things that any still member of the SNP supported the SUN should take on board, from 2014, when the despot took over, till now, never once has National Council, which has now been abolished in the SNP, conference has never debated independence or a road to independence. If in fact you remember, Angus Brendan and Chris McElhenney got booed for trying to get a debate on independence at the Scottish National Party. Booed. And the leadership sat there stony-faced. It was a telling sign, surely.
I think the problem for everybody with any common sense who has an interest in Scottish independence, whether you support it or not, is that the SNP do not have a plan to regain our independence, and they will not allow it to be debated. They have bland sound bites which are completely meaningless and, quite frankly, after this length of time, have become offensive and insulting. You see it on Twitter every single day, especially it was accelerated last week in the run-up to Polling Day, where it's vote SNP for independence. And as soon as people go in to say, right then, how does that happen? How do you bring that about? What's the plan? Then there's either a block or you're ignored, or somebody else tweets with restricted or impossible responses, because they don't want to talk about independence. They use it, they wheel it out for expediency, for distraction, and when it's coming up to election time. And that's the conundrum. You've got the unionists who say the SNP are obsessed with independence. You've got independentistas who say the converse is the position, and the SNP are obsessed with everything that deflects from independence. And the sadness of this is, and I think for those of you who watched Still Game, remember the very poignant scenes at the end when Jack and Victor and all their pals that we had got to know and love, and we recognised them as either ourselves or people close to us. They seemed to be part of our community, our folk. You watch them get older and you watch them fade away in the last episode. Remember, they just faded away into the distance. They'd gone. They were dead. It was over. And unfortunately, the problem in Scotland, and it's been accelerating in the past few years, is far too many Scots are fading away. And like Jack and Victor in their later days, they're living in the shadows. They're not achieving their potential. They're not the happy people they should be. They're not fulfilled. Their health is suffering. Their education is suffering. Their life chances are limited. And, you know, next week when I speak about poverty, I'll be speaking about poverty and the law. And I'll talk about how if you're born into poverty, you come into dealings with the law in very sharp focus. You're far more likely to become involved with the law. You're far more likely to be arrested. You're far more likely to be homeless. You're far more likely to be experienced, to become addicted, to have issues surrounding drink, drugs, and generally poor life expectancy and poor life expectations. And some of these are the reasons why we support independence. But actually, all the people that are living in the shadows, that are not coming out into the light, who are not able to see the light, who are not able to live the dream, are being prevented from living the dream by people like John Swinney and Nicola Sturgeon and those around them who have deliberately and calculatedly stunted the growth, stunted the potential, hobbled the life chances of the people of our country, and they can be allowed to do that no more. That is why the independence movement needs to unite with us in Liberate Scotland, with the ISP, with ALBA, with the real activists in the SNP. The grassroots movement of the Independentistas have to come together and to tell Swinney and those around them, the game's a bogey, your time is up, come to the table, get independence delivered next year, and let's get all hands on deck to rebuild our country and to reclaim our status as a nation, independent, no better than, no worse than, no inferior to, but equal to all of the nations elsewhere worldwide.
Yeah, well said, Eva. Look, Phil, you were in that election in 2015 when we took over almost 1.5 million votes and 56 out of 59 seats, and now we're losing seats like Hamilton. And it's not a Labour resurgence, as Eva pointed out. The Labour vote didn't go up, and in fact it went down. And actually, even down south, it's showing you here. Here's a reform gain from Labour. Labour's vote went down by 50% in one of their prime areas. This is a fault of the SNP. And how did we get from 1.5 million voters, Phil, down to now under 750,000 turning out for the SNP? But it's everyone else's fault.
Yeah, there's the leadership. It's entirely down to the leadership. And the reality is, the sad reality is that most people don't have the time to spend even the limited. We're not full time on this. We're part-time players because we've got other things to go on, your families, your lives, your jobs, so actually to find the truth is not easy, especially if you're relying on mainstream media. Then you've got no chance. So you're struggling to look at the details. How many would know that Labour actually went down 2% in Hamilton and Larkhall? Why? Well, why? Because they're the lesser of two evils or three evils. So some people stuck out with them. SNP went down 16.8%. Reform went up 26.1%. Conservative down 11.5%. The Greens up 2.6%. And Lib Dems 0.8%. That kind of detail isn't that hard to find if you know where to look. But who can be arsed? My mum will probably vote SNP, even though the guy that she's voting for is a clown in Coatbridge. He's not reliable. He's not done anything. He's got no va-va-voom. He's got no pizzazz. He's just in it to grease him and his mates and his family's setup, and completely non-representative of what matters. I don't see any of these clowns shouting about independence, or more importantly, doing anything about it. They're not doing anything about it. They're collecting their money and sitting for a decade now, 11 years, while the people of Scotland suffer, giving glib sound bites in general. I'll slow down. I'm not going to go there again, but because this should enrage us, because people are dying. I mean, I mean, I know we were going to talk about the potential nuclear war and the Brett
Time's
part
beating
Brett
us.
aid and that. But so you know, it's like, what do we do here? It's like, do we die slowly under the SNP, or let the Brits get us nuked in a stupid, unnecessary war and snuffed out in the blink of an eye? I don't know. It's horrendous. It's dangerous times, and we should really, people, please look to Colonel Douglas MacGregor, John Mearsheimer, Scott Ritter. Jesus, even the Mirror's reporting that Britain's at war with Russia and in big trouble. And look at what's happening in your local streets. Look at the frontline workers. Ask the frontline workers what's happening. Ask your social workers, your taxi drivers, your police, your nurses, your teachers. The disillusionment of everybody fiercely fighting against this greed, this privatization, and this deconstruction of our civil society. It is disgusting, and we've got to fight it. And that is the grounds upon which we keep people informed, and we should be amassing and joining together and uniting through information, knowledge, tolerance, understanding, to create a unified front to free us from this despicable situation we find ourselves in right now. It's sickening.
Yeah.
We've got to act. We've got to
Absolutely.
act. And here's the last point. No one can do everything, but everyone can do something. Get off your ass and do it.
Yes, indeed you can, folks. It can't be done. You've got to want to do it enough, not type about it or talk about it. You've got to get involved. It can't be done by the people on their own. They need all out on the street, helping, doing whatever you can. But here's the one, John Swinney's talked, Alan, about doing a deal with Labour, and if we win well in 26, we will we'll have a Section 30 independence referendum. This week, there he goes. Starmer says no independence referendum while he's Prime Minister. Not just no circumstance, won't happen. Just not going to happen under any circumstances. And here's his sidekick, the man who thinks men can grow a cervix. Egypt.
What is the Labour Party's position on a second independence referendum? Can you rule it out at any point for the next kind of 10 years? Would it be something that you could countenance?
Categorically. We are a unionist party. We believe in the union. We can rule that out categorically.
Is the branch office in Glasgow going to be saying exactly the same thing?
Yes.
What?
Even the interviewer said it, which was rather good. But Labour ain't going to do it. John's tactic of having a deal with Labour and winning big and getting it, it's pie in the sky. It's like me becoming the next manager of Scotland.
Yeah, I mean, Labour are just, wouldn't even spit on them. I mean, I've got to say first, I mean, Lloyd, if that scenario comes about with Sturgeon, I think there'll be a plaque on SNP HQ. Here lies the remains of the SNP, died 2025, because they will be going absolutely nowhere. But Starmer, let me say this very closely to you. You and your branch manager in the Vichy party in Scotland have no say in Scottish independence. That say is for the people of Scotland and the people of Scotland alone. Now, I know, Starmer, you are trying to put Britain on a war footing. Well, 2026, the people of Scotland will be on the doorsteps, in the streets, with their passion, with their pride, and with their truth. And if you look at the back of Eva, you'll see a book called The Final Battle. Not only will 26 be our final battle, it'll be our victory. Because in 2026, if the people of Scotland want it, we will be getting independence, regardless of what Labour, Starmer, or anybody else in Westminster thinks. It is not up to you, it's up to the Scottish people. And if need be, there's two options for independence. Let's go down the democratic one, because we do not want the other one.
Here. But if we don't start fights, we finish them. But to round off this show, because one thing is, we've talked about all the poverty, everything that's going wrong. John's talking about all net zero and all that nonsense. But, we've got no money to pay the WASP women, no money to pay the winter fuel allowance, no money to get rid of the rape clause or the bedroom tax. But, the English, they. A strategic defence. Britain is not ready for war. We're going to spend 3% on our GDP and tooling up, Lloyd. I just think the people of Scotland and the UK need to understand something. We know that he's talking about war with Russia. It is scary to think about it. But ladies and gentlemen, please watch for the next couple of minutes.
Who would win if Russia and Britain went to war? Try not to laugh while watching this. First, Russia has 1.3 million military troops. Britain has just 190,000. Russia has a reserve military of 250,000, but Britain has 37,000. Russia has 14,240 tanks, and Britain only has 227. Russia's military budget is $410 billion annually, while the UK spends just $67 billion. Russia has 5,889 nuclear warheads. As of 2023, meanwhile, UK has only 260. Russia has 6,574 self-propelled artillery. What does Britain have? Just 89. Russia's total military aircraft is 809. Britain has just 120. Instead of discussing peace with Russia, politicians in Britain now say young people would be asked to join the military in a war against Russia. With clear statistics like this, who do you think would win? Let's advocate for peace, not senseless war.
Well, that's obviously, you know me, I'm an old peacenik. But the stupidity, this sabre rattling by Starmer and wanting to get people into, our Scottish lads into the British Army, it's frightening. And it's just so morally repugnant, Lloyd.
Yes, it is, but it's utterly and completely absurd. Recruitment to the so-called Royal Regiment of Scotland is at such low levels that they're transferring recruits from other regiments, not Scottish regiments, into the Royal Regiment of Scotland, and they have a regular recruiting drive in Samoa and Fiji. Now, you know, this is the idea that Britain could go to war with anybody is absurd. It's utterly and completely absurd. I mean, the figures on that the figures in that particular video are the high point figures in real terms. They don't have as many planes, they don't have as many tanks, they don't have as much self-propelled artillery, and they've got barely enough ground troops, active fighting ground troops, that would last around about, I think the estimate was 4 to 6 weeks if they were actually on the front line in the Donbass right now. But aside from this, I find it frightening that there's a Labour government at the moment who intend to turbocharge the economy of the United Kingdom by means of defence. Because defence is not defence. I mean, there was a certain honesty in the United Kingdom up until about 1963, when the Ministry of Defence at that time was called the War Department, because that's what it is. A Ministry of Defence would make sure that everybody could get a GP's appointment, everybody could get their teeth done, everybody could get their eyesight done. That's defence. What are you defending when you go to war for a country that can't provide for its own people? But the other worrying thing about this is that Starmer's Labour Party, to me, is effectively a wing of the Netanyahu government in Israel. Everything that they're doing is effectively supportive of that. The idea that the United Kingdom will build 12 nuclear attack submarines. This is an absurdity, an utter and complete absurdity. As we're watching the war in Ukraine, we're seeing the change. There is a major change in the warfare at the moment. Warfare will not be done by boots on the ground. Warfare will not happen by submarines hiding in the seas, because they can't hide anymore. It's as simple as that. The whole idea also, and deeply, deeply insulting to all Scottish workers, was Starmer making these announcements while being at the shipyard in Govan. And every single announcement he made was about the creation of jobs out with Scotland.
Yes.
You know, it's nuts. Britain and the British people, I feel sorry for English people. They grow up believing that they live in the greatest country in the world, that had the greatest empire in the world, and one day those great days will return, right? That's the reform shtick, effectively. The reality is, this is a tiny wee island off the coast of Europe, not even connected properly to Europe anymore, that could barely fight its way out of a wet paper bag. But they've convinced themselves that somehow they are God's chosen people, which is maybe why they have this extraordinary connection with the Israelis. You know, genuinely, what can you say about a Labour Party that denies democracy at every level? Lammy and his statement about, you know, there will be no referendum in Scotland, there will be no opportunity for the people of Scotland to exercise their democratic right. Where did he get that idea? Maybe he got it from the Israeli spokesman David Mencer, who was effectively Lammy's mentor when he first got into politics. I'm all over the place at the moment. I'm sorry. It's really hard having a 17-year-old daughter who tomorrow morning we might find that because of the stupidity, ineptitude and downright ignorance of a Labour government, there might be a strike on Faslane and Coolport or on Rosyth Naval Base, and that her life chances and her life or her future opportunities would be effectively eradicated in that moment. I despise and loathe people who only a few months ago were backbenchers howling at the Tories, who then suddenly get jobs that makes them think that they are some kind of, that they are the supreme beings. You know, especially when they're people of such limited ability as David Lammy, John Healey, and indeed Keir Starmer. It's independence is the only way that we can get away from this bloody nonsense. Over the years we've come so close to nuclear conflagration that we don't. I don't want this to continue anymore. I mean, let's face the reality of Britain and its martial power. Britain and its martial power could not defeat a working-class insurgent army in the 6 counties of the north of Ireland over a 30-year period. But they're going to take on Russia. Aye, right.
Well, folks, the clock's beating us again, but I just want to end it on this note, where the Zionists in Israel think that they're the people, and where the English think they're the people, load of nonsense, because we are the people, and you know who I'm talking about. Come on. Till we see you all again next week. Take care.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.